by the agents that I coach is how do you talk about equity to your homeowners? Here's the thing. I don't want you to talk about equity any more than you feel comfortable. You're going to have to get probably a lender involved with this, but I'm going to give you as much information as I feel like you should be able to share and you'll want to share. You can ask me questions because this is a mastermind, so I won't try to take up all the time with me just talking about this. But it is such a prevalent and important issue that will generate tons of business for you because 60% of the people out there are homeowners, or 65, I think it's 65, 35, I think is the split between homeowners and renters. And the average homeowner right now has $400,000 in net worth, $300,000 in actual equity. Average renter, at least the last I saw in the statistics, their median net worth is $10,000 something dollars. So there's a huge difference between those that own property and what that means to them financially and those that don't. So that's what we're talking about. And your ability as a real estate agent to get people to think about what equity means for them when they don't really understand, other than that they live in a house and it's gained value, which they love. So how do they leverage that? So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's first go through some of the motivations. Hopefully you can see my screen. Because you're going to primarily be going to talk to your agents in the sense of what motivates them to want to talk to you about equity and want to do something with it. So motivations is the main thing, okay? So we don't have too many people on right now, so I'll open it up. When you have a lot of equity, what does that mean to you? What's the motivation of leveraging and understanding what equity means? Come on, Robert. I know you have ideas. Felicia, Sid.
Well, there's lots of stuff that equity matters. The biggest thing we have in talking to people is trying to explain to them that it's usable to them. They think it's locked, they can't touch it. And that's not true, but trying to explain, or more specifically, convince them. We can explain it to them, but a lot of people can't be convinced that they can access it in different ways. I mean, there's lots of ways. You've got, you can do a cash out refi, you can do a HELOC. You can use it as leverage for the next purchase, depending on how you're doing. If you're doing a seller financing, you can sometimes switch debt around to the new part. But of course, these are techniques and strategies that explaining to somebody how that works to the point where they would feel comfortable, and that's the point, is feeling comfortable doing it. Okay. Most people don't feel comfortable with it.
Okay. No, I love that. That's true. The comfort level of using it, because the reason they don't feel comfortable, in my mind, and maybe you have other ideas about this, is that it's still a loan. It doesn't feel like it's your money. So that's what a lot of people ask. Can I use it? Is it mine? Like the only reason they think that they have equity is if they sell, or how they can get equity is if they sell their property. So if they don't want to sell their property, then where's the equity? If I take out a HELOC, I'm taking out a loan, right? So the idea of leveraging or using equity, even though we're telling them that it's their equity, they don't feel like it's really theirs. Does that make sense?
And they also feel that everything goes at risk with it. Like the point of a HELOC is, I still remember so many commercials and stuff talking about when you get a HELOC, you have put your home at risk of losing it. It's like, well, that's a technical truth, but that's also a very unique and extreme circumstance. It's not the norm.
Yeah, I love
but people focus on the extreme.
Yeah.
I'm as a great example, I used to work in commodities, and whenever I told people I trade commodities, it's like, oh, I heard about a guy that lost his house in that once. It's like, and from what we can tell, one guy lost his house and everybody heard about it for 40 years. And it's what everybody knew. It's what they focused on. And so everyone was scared, not realizing it's like, no, we can control the risks. And in fact, there's a lot of safeguards meant to help you already control that risk. Yeah. And we can make sure you do it safely. But again, convincing them of that so that they're comfortable is a whole different thing.
Great. And the reason I'm starting out this way is so that we have kind of a foundation of the things that people are thinking, and even maybe what you're thinking about that. So what Robert brought up is actually a really good point. Back in prior to 2006, so prior to the 2008 crash, people were using or leveraging equity regularly. I mean, if you remember back in those days, and many of today's homeowners still remember that. And if they don't remember it, their parents do, and they told them about it, right? Or they lived in a house that ended up going under foreclosure or something like that. There's a lot of those memories that they've held on to for all this time where equity was leveraged. It wasn't leveraged very smartly. If you remember those times where people were continuing to refinance properties because the rates were so low, it wasn't just the rates were low, not like in COVID, but the fact that the prices of homes were going up so quickly that there was always this extra amount of money that was available to them. And it was so popular to take it out. And then they were using it to buy cars and boats and go on vacations. They weren't just using it towards investment. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too, but there is that. Are they comfortable with it? What's the risk? You're going to run into that when you talk to people about equity. So love that we brought that up. So these are the kind of things that we have in terms of motivations, both on the negative side, but on the positive side, they're wondering, can I use this equity? It doesn't seem to be mine because I have to take out a loan for it anyway. One thing that hopefully we all understand is that when you're getting a 7 to 8% loan for whatever you want to do with it, honestly, whether you want to reinvest that money, build a business, pay off debt, whatever it is that you might want to do. If you think about it, even with today's interest rates, because that seems really high, this is actually a very low rate to borrow against. And the reason that is because it's being leveraged against a real property. There's a house involved. So the banks you can go into a bank or go to a lender and literally within a half an hour or even less, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm going to give you $500,000 at this rate right here, all because you have a house and you've paid your bills, you've got a decent credit score. That's basically the whole criteria for getting a loan. And that's because it's based on real property. So that's what is different about home equity than a signature loan or even a credit card, an insecure or unsecured loan. A credit card right now is probably between 20 and 30% interest rate. So, the ability to leverage equity based on a house gives you the opportunity to borrow against it at a relatively low rate. Does everyone understand that? Okay. So I just wanted to create that as a foundation. Now let's talk about what it means to talk equity to your people. See if we can get this to erase well enough. Okay, so let's go through the actual process of calling somebody up and talking about equity and in terms of steps. Step number one, if you've got the Captivate CRM or any way of coming up with an equity statement, that's important for them to see. Talking in general about equity is not nearly as powerful as talking specifically about their equity. So the first step in this, before you call anybody up, anybody that is a homeowner in your database, is to give them a home report. Right? Now, this home report can come from our database. It can also come from our CRM, I should say. HomeBot is another one. You probably used HomeBot before or heard about HomeBot. And then there's also a CMA that can be created. These new digital CMAs can help you create kind of this equity report in minutes instead of it taking half an hour, 45 minutes like it used to. You don't have to do a CMA in the sense that you would do it for when they're going to list their house. Later on, you might do that if that's what they want to do. But these are the three ways that you can give them an actual assessment, an estimate of what their equity is. Does this have to be accurate? It does not. So please don't get caught up in the fact that, oh, I pulled a home report on someone's home and it said their house is worth $525,000, and if you go on to Zillow, it probably is pretty similar because they're using the same tools. They're using what's called CoreLogic, or what's the other one? There's CoreLogic, and it'll come back to me in a minute, but there's two main data sources for home values out there. They're called AVMs, and that's where most of this information is coming from. Here in Utah, we are a non-disclosure state, so a lot of times the information is not accurate. So let's say this home report comes up at 525. You and they believe the house is worth, I don't know, let's say 560. Okay, there's nothing wrong with starting a conversation with a report that comes out and says their house has an estimated value of 525. We know that every property has a range. This range is actually a very reasonable range. So I guess the first thing I want to teach you or explain to you is please don't get caught up on estimates that come from these tools because they're not accurate or right on the money. It never is. It never will be, even in a disclosed state where they disclose what homes recently sold for and things like that. This is still always going to be a range. The current condition of the home, we've talked about that before, its potential to maximize value. I just sold a house in a neighborhood for $829,000 that the estimate, basically our CMA came in at 750. And we have a house that's just 4 doors down that is still on the market, hasn't sold yet, same size, same year built, everything, and it's listed at 700,000. That's a $129,000 difference. So please, for your sake and for your customer's sake, for your homeowner's sake, don't get caught up on one number or a report that gives them a number that doesn't seem to be totally accurate. You're just trying to give them a suggested idea of what their equity is in their property based on what the property is worth and what they owe on the property. Okay. Any questions about that part of it? Because that's kind of the biggest hurdle I feel like I have to get over with a lot of real estate agents is they get so caught up on this number and they think that their clients are caught up on this number. All you have to do is talk to them about your house has a range to it. We're just trying to get an estimated range. We can get more accurate once we get into the detail of what it may mean if you want to sell your house, etc. Okay. And Cameron, do you have something to say?
Yeah. Should your range be a little bit closer? I was doing some comparisons, just looking through HomeBot and what Lofty's home thing does. And there was a huge disparity in the range. I mean, we're talking like $250,000 difference, and that's quite a big alarm. It almost makes you feel like, I mean, I understand a range because I like to talk in ranges because there's so many variables to the true value of a home.
Yeah.
When you're $250,000 off, it almost feels like you're going in and you're not knowing what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I totally would agree with that. And I found that so I used HomeBot for 5 years before I moved over to the home report. I ran into the same thing with HomeBot, and it depended on the area, it depended on the house. There were so many variables to it. And so it's hard to say that one tool is better than the other. Let me mute someone here. Get a lot of background noise. Okay, there it goes. So I would say, again, that's why I started with this for all of you, is I really don't want you to get too caught up in the beginning conversation with your client about what that value shows up with, whether you use HomeBot, Home Report, whether you run your own CMA. If you really feel like the report that you're going to talk to them about is off, that's a great reason to have a conversation. Because honestly, the next step in this whole process is to have the conversation. And the conversation usually will start with, what they think that estimate may be. And then you're going to lead them towards, okay, so if we're really going to get to that real number, what do we want to do? And that's what's most important about the conversation. What's the plan? Not what the number is, right? It's about what the plan is. Does that help a little bit, Sid? Because I agree with you. I know in the beginning when I first started working with HomeBot, I was like, it was funny how mad agents would get that those numbers weren't right, and even sometimes the customer. But as soon as I got in the door or on the phone with one of those clients, and I said, you know what? Let me take a closer look. I'm the pro, not this tool. This just gives you a good idea. And then I went in there and said, your house is actually worth $200,000 more. If that's the case, they were thrilled. They weren't going to be mad at me because of this tool. I'm just using the tool as a way to kind of start the conversation.
Yeah, no, and that's what I like to do because, like I said, until you see the house, until you see the location, until you understand that, and that's where Zillow and all these other guys that use CoreLogic, they differ is they can't see all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I hope you all feel this way. You are the expert. These are just tools to help facilitate a conversation and to get things moving towards them talking to you. But you're the one that's going to always give that ultimate, with the lender, of course, who's going to provide the money, the ultimate understanding of what that property is worth.
Right. Okay.
And like in this example that I used here, I mean, really what a property's worth is what someone's willing to pay for it. The fact that they did about $23,000 worth of improvements. So they were basically around here when I first looked at the property, when I actually went over to the house and did that, tour and the listing report that I do. And they could have just listed it and done nothing to it for $750. Hopefully it would have sold. The other house, as an example, started at $750 and dropped to $700. It wasn't staged. It wasn't improved in some ways. They decided to go all in, beautifully staged home, $23,000 of improvements. They did board and batten on the front of the house, which cost $9,000. They did $2,000 with improvements on their yard because it was kind of a mess. And then inside we redid the kitchen countertops and the backsplash, and they put in new carpet. So they really went all in. This is, to me, what I would call a flip, right? If you're going to increase value by, $80,000, you're flipping a house in a sense. So that's why when I teach when I teach my clients, what I do as a professional agent is I'm going to help you flip your home into bigger profits if you want to follow my advice. If you don't, we can still sell your house at $750. But I guess the point here is equity has a lot to do with many variables that aren't set as much as we might think that they are. Okay. Or they think they. Okay. So step one, to get things moving along, you've got to have something. Whether you use HomeBot, whether you use Home Report, you can like or dislike any of these tools, but you've got to get that out to them so that that's marinating with them every month. And I don't even mind if the marination is a little sour sometimes. They're like, dude, you keep sending me this home report and it says that my house is worth $525 and I swear it's worth $600. And then what do you say to them? So step number 2 is you have to set up an appointment. Right? That's your goal. So this is the goal. We'll talk about how you meet that goal because there's kind of some sub steps into this. But my goal is to have an appointment to assess value for one. And then after I help assess a value, right, what to do. Okay. That's basically what I'm doing. Now let's talk about what those options are. And that's how you start talking to your people, because some people don't want to sell their house. Some people would like to move up and live in a bigger home or have more options or live closer to work or, in a different area, have more land. There's so many different reasons. Your job is to help them understand what they are working with in terms of equity, right? So it's not just value, but it's equity, because that's how you find equity, what they owe versus what it's worth. And then what do I do with that, right? So we talked about motivations before. So here are the primary motivations that I found that people have when it comes to equity if they have someone to teach them how to do that. One motivation, and I always start with this one because it's the one that surprises them the most because it doesn't benefit me directly if they want to do it. And everybody likes this part, is I want to pay off home and debt sooner. That's a huge motivation. I'd love to pay off my home sooner. If you haven't done this yet for yourself, I paid off my home it's been about 15 years. It's crazy. It's been that long. So I was able, with other properties that I invested, and that's what we'll talk about, because that's how I got to do that, is I bought other properties and let those other the equity of those other properties pay off the equity of my home. And then I use that equity, it's kind of this circle of equity, right, to buy other properties. So the idea of paying off home and debt sooner is a huge motivator. So I like to start that as a conversation point when I tell people about, hey, John, I've noticed you've been opening your home report. Hey, I want to talk to you about what you think about what that amount of money means to you, right? And if they start talking about, well, I think it's worth more, like, hey, it definitely could be worth more. Would you like me to do a more comprehensive assessment, CMA, on that value of that property? But let's talk about what you want to do with that equity, what that means in terms of what you can do with it. And one of the first things most of them will say is, well, I really don't want to sell my house. I got a 2.5%, interest in my home, 2.5% mortgage interest. I don't know if I want to move away from that. But you know what? It would be nice if that 600,000 in equity that I have, or let's say it's 500,000 in equity or whatever it is, it's just sitting there doing nothing. It's tappable. So that's what we call, when it's like what Robert said, we have access to it. We call it tappable equity, right? You can tap into it. But should I do it? And then those fears come into play, right? Is it really my money? Do I have to borrow against it? Is it worth borrowing against it? And things like that. But getting back to this, these motivations, one I love to talk about is, would you like to pay off your home in debt sooner? We can talk about what that means. And just so that you know, as I go through these motivations, we call this the debt consolidation calculation or assessment, right? How can they do that? Now, why does this work? It doesn't always work for everybody, because again, they're already working with an interest rate that they have to borrow against. So if they're going to borrow against on a HELOC, for example, at 8%, let's say it's all the way up at 8% right now, then whatever they're paying, the debt that they're having to pay off should be higher than 8% to make it worthwhile, right? So we'll talk about what that means in terms of helping them pay off debt sooner. But what we call this is a blended rate. They might have a 2.5% rate on their home, but they've got a credit card that has, if they leave a balance on it, they're probably paying upwards of 25% on that, right? They might have student loans that they're paying a certain amount on it. They might have cars and other things like that. So it's a combination of the amount of interest rate that they're paying on it. Plus, there is some element that I'll talk to you about in just a second, about the length or term of that loan. Obviously, if I take a car, for example, that's let's say it's on a 6-year loan, right? And I transfer that car loan to a 30-year loan, obviously the monthly payment on that loan is going to decrease significantly. That's going to free up more money in my budget, which, if they do it correctly, which I'll talk to you about in just a few minutes, it will actually allow them to put down more payment towards a principal payment that could, not always, but that could overall improve their debt and the amount that they're paying overall for that interest. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But just to let you know, what's important here is that paying off debt and home sooner is a super big motivator for a lot of people. And then when you get your lender involved, I'll explain how they're going to talk about this, okay? The second motivator is moving up without spending more. This is a huge motivator for a lot of people because it gives them the ability to get more of a home that they want, but doesn't make sense financially. Financially, this is about their monthly budget. Well, I'm not making more money, and the idea of actually getting into more debt doesn't make sense to me. So we have to talk about the combination of debt versus equity, right? When you own property, different when you own property compared to like owning cars that depreciate, and what it means in terms of getting more, but making it something that makes sense financially per month as well as long-term, okay? But that's the second motivation. We'll talk about that in a second too. And then the next motivation is downsizing. But it's more than just downsizing. I say that, but it's really about retirement. So I talk to a lot of people that are in, my age, in their 50s, that like at some point I want to retire. I was just talking to someone yesterday about this, and it's kind of cool because I went in for a listing presentation, and they're selling their big home, and they're going to move into a smaller property, but they're going to have about $450,000 in equity that they're going to cash out in. And I had a really cool conversation about buying another property while they've retired using this equity that they have right here and what the benefits are of that. So we're talking about what we're talking about is a retirement plan. For most people, just so you understand what I mean by this, is that when they retire, they eat away at their retirement funds that they've saved, their IRA, right? And they're probably paying, which is crazy, about 30% in taxes because they don't have any write-offs anymore. So think about it in terms of someone that's going into retirement. I no longer have kids that I write off. I'm not going to have a mortgage, because I've already paid it off, for example. I don't have a business anymore. I'm not even working. So everything that I take out of retirement gets taxed at the full amount because I don't have anything to offset that, right? So when I talk to those that are retiring, I even helped my mom do this. She was so thrilled now that she did this because she has a rental property. I tried to get her to get 3. Now she's about to buy another one, which is kind of nice. But for her, because she's getting a monthly rental of about $2,300 for that rental property, she went ahead and paid the full amount of the value. She didn't want to have any debt, and she doesn't work, so she has fixed income. So in her case, after being retired, she's buying the property entirely. So she's not going to make as much in terms of leveraging equity when she's not leveraging a bank loan, but she's still going to do better for herself because she's now bringing in $2,300 a month, which for her it'd be like getting a huge dividend on a stock that normally you're never going to see a dividend like this, right? You pay for $450,000, for example, on a stock. That's great. The stock may grow, but you're not benefiting it until you sell it. In most cases, if you do get a dividend, certainly not going to be $2,300 a month. At least I don't know of anyone that has one like that. So she's getting $2,300 a month, but she also has these tax benefits with write-offs because now she has a mortgage. Every time she drives to or all the expenses that come with having a rental property, she's able to write off, and it helps her significantly in terms of her write-offs on that as well. And then the other thing is this property at $450,000 a month, $450,000 value, every single year is increasing. And I always like to say an average of about 5%. That's about a 60-year average around that point. So she's getting about $23,000 to $25,000 a year in equity gain off of that property while she's retired. Of course, if she had multiple properties, you can imagine how that could add up. So downsizing and setting yourself up for retirement in terms of growth instead of shrinking your retirement money is another big motivator. Okay. The other one, so pay off home, moving up, downsizing, and then relocating. For a lot of people, I just say this because sometimes people are like, I don't need to move up. I don't need a bigger home. So it's really the same thing as this second item, but I just word it differently because some people are like, yeah, I would love to relocate. Maybe they want to come, into the city, or they want to live by the beach, or they want to live on a golf course, or whatever it is in that time of their life that they want to do. So I call it relocating. Well, could you imagine relocating without spending more? Okay, so that's another motivator. And then the final one is investing. And I always say investing in property, but they can invest in anything, obviously. But these are the 5 reasons or motivators for people to take equity, tap into it, and leverage that towards doing one of these 5 things. So basically, when I call somebody up, and this is what hopefully you get today, because I don't want to go, I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these as I kind of did already, so you have a base understanding of it, but don't worry that you don't understand how to get into the details of what this all means in terms of actual real numbers for them. That's what your lender is for. Now, when you talk about your lender to your your homeowners about equity, don't introduce them as a loan officer or a lender. And you have to meet with your lender to make sure they understand their role in this. They're now an advisor. They're a financial advisor that specializes in real estate. And isn't that what a lender is? Honestly, I mean, Eric Olson, you're a lender. You've been a lender for how long?
About 25 years.
25 years. Would you feel uncomfortable telling people that you are a financial advisor when it comes to real estate?
No, so long as they didn't think I was selling them stocks or bonds.
Exactly. Yeah, because you can't do that. But the ability to understand what equity means, how to do these 5 things. How often do you talk to your clients in some way, even if it's indirectly, just because it comes up, about one of these 5 things when they're buying property?
Every single time.
Every single time. Honestly, this is what your lenders are talking about all the time, because the motivators are what are driving people to buy and sell properties. You as a real estate agent are maybe involved in just the transaction of, oh, they would like this home, they want to get in it, they want to put an offer on it. So you don't see all that behind the scenes stuff if you're not there at the office with the lender. But these kind of questions are coming up because this is what your clients are trying to do. Okay. So your ability to get them to think about doing it sooner than later is what this is all about when it comes to these home equity assessment appointments, because most people sit on this equity for years wanting to do one of these 5 things. Literally, I bet if you talk to anyone that actually does this, they were thinking about any one of these 5 things for 2, 3, sometimes 5 years before they finally got the gumption or the desire enough, or something came into play that caused them to say, okay, let's do it. Maybe they got a raise at work or a transfer or something like this. But we found that there's about 30% of people out there that want to do these things. They just don't know how. Make sense? Okay. So this is how the conversation goes. When I talk to someone, I say, hey, John, I've been sending that report. I noticed you're opening it up. That's the best way to go about this. Go with the lowest hanging fruit. Don't just blindly call homeowners up. At least I wouldn't do that and say, hey, John, it's been a while. I've been sending you that home report. Not sure if you're even opening it or you even care or you think it's accurate. Let's have a conversation. I like to actually send it to every single homeowner in my database. So find and even bring in, if you need to, every person you know into your database, put them into 2 categories. They're either renters or they're homeowners. 35% renters, 65% homeowners. If they're a homeowner, give them the home bot, home report, whatever it is, hopefully automated, because it takes them a while to think about it, right? They're going to get it every single month. Now, if you use the Captivate CRM, you can go in there and filter by the last, by the recent engagement. I forgot what it's called. Sorry. And then you have the other one that's about their lead score, right? They're right next to each other in your database. You just go in there and find the people that are most recently opening up that report, or they've done it multiple times. And then that's who you call. And then you say, hey, John, this is Mike. I noticed you've been opening up that home report. It says that your house, I always talk about their value, says that your house is worth around $525 and you've got about $250,000 in there. Does that sound right to you as far as equity? And then I let them tell me what they think. And if they don't agree, I think that's great. And it's awesome. Like, oh, you think it's worth $600,000? Oh, that very well could be. As a matter of fact, there's always a range in properties, and based on how it shows and other information, that's what I specialize in, is really understanding a home's true value. You should own that, right? And then you say, you've got the $250,000 in there. Have you thought about leveraging that equity for anything? And then I love the pause, because the first thing they say after a pause, because they think you're selling them, is what? What do you think they're going to say? Any idea? If you haven't done this, then you have to do it, because you'll know, because almost every time they'll say, well, I don't want to sell. That's what they think you're calling about, is, well, I'm not sure I want to sell right now. Like, oh no, John, that's totally fine. I get it. I have my home. I've lived in it for 13 years. I got a 2.5, actually mine's a 1.99% interest that I got on it a long time ago. And I leave it there now so that I can leverage that equity that I have in my home, because I have a HELOC on it as well, towards buying other properties. That's how I invest. And that's how I grow wealth. And that's how I paid off my home. I love to say it like that, because then I've already introduced them to a few of these options. And I said, I don't know if you know this, but there's actually 5 ways that you can leverage equity to build and grow wealth. It's like the most easy and best way for anybody to build and grow wealth. And you don't have to leave your job or do anything else or take big risks or anything like that. I can teach you how to do that. Would you like to know what those 5 things are? And literally it's like, yeah, sure. What are you talking about? Well, you can pay off your debt and your home sooner by leveraging your equity, if it makes sense, right? And so we can take a look at where you are in terms of other debt, what that rate is that you're paying on that debt, and how you might be able to leverage that equity, which is basically your money. It's just not, you haven't tapped into it, without even selling your home. There's a opportunity for that. You could also, like, let's say you love your house, but it's not big enough, or you want to downsize or even relocate. I can teach you how you can tap into your equity. You could even rent out your home and not get rid of that 2.5% interest that you have. and then buy another home, and now you've got a rental property and you're building and growing wealth. Would you like to know how to do that? And then finally, I tell them that with this investing opportunity out there, whether they have kids going to college or any other reason that they might want to invest in property, there's ways of leveraging your equity towards building and growing wealth. And that's what I've done. And I always tell them that's what I've done. I'd love to teach you how to do that. Would you like to know how to do that? Okay, now that I've given you the kind of the script, who out there that's on this call has tried this, or what do you think about what I just shared? Sid, I can tell you're just about ready to open that mouth there. What?
I've actually had conversations about this, not hitting the 5 points, but I've actually had conversations about this, and there's a lot of people who, it makes sense to them. My mom, for example, when we did her home, I sat down with her and said, "You really need to change homes. You got so many stairs in this thing, you can't even get up and down them." And she was in a tri-level, for heaven's sake. And so what we did is I talked to her and told her a little bit about HELOC, and she took a HELOC out, and we bought her a brand new home, and she didn't have to pick up another mortgage on it. And as we sold her home, we were able to pay off that HELOC. She still has that HELOC and still uses that money and that equity to buy things and invest in other stuff. And she's been doing that since I talked her into it. So,
oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I love that Sid said it was his mom. I did that with my mom too. And we wouldn't do things like this if we didn't know that it works and it wasn't good, right? We're not going to put our mom in a situation where take too much risk. Because remember, we talked before about people feeling like, wait, where's the risk? Where's the downside to all this? And of course, there's always some risk there to it. But long-term holds in property have always proven, in all the investments I've ever done in my 30 years, has always proven if I can hold it for long-term, I'm going to win. Right, it's the most secure way to invest.
Well, and the biggest scare for me was, hey, if it fails, she comes and lives in my basement, right?
There you go.
Don't want that.
Yeah. Anybody else out there had thoughts, or as I've been talking about this, or if you've actually done it, what kind of experiences have you had talking about equity to people out there?
So one of the stuff that we do, well, actually, I'll tell you two things. One of them, obviously, we talk about people and their current debts, because a lot of people have really high credit card debt, and some of these credit cards go up to 30%. And I know this because we do it too. When we flip a house, we will often put it on credit cards to do the flip, and then we want to pay off that flip. And so the equity can be grabbed through, say, a HELOC to go ahead and pay it off, to bring down the interest rate on the debt we used for the flip. But one of the things that we do, which is kind of an interesting technique, and again, this is for the investments in a different way, since so many potential flips are low quality properties, they want you to do cash only, and you have to be able to close within often days. So what I did with one of my clients is we had him put together a whole HELOC, and then we put together an LLC. And then what we do is we have the HELOC loan its money to the LLC, or give the money to the LLC to go ahead. And then when they do the cash offer, the LLC is acting as the financer for that. Now, you're probably sitting here wondering, why would you need to do it that way? Why don't you just pay the money from the HELOC? Well, because if the LLC is the one that's doing it, then it's considered to be a recordable loan. And that way, when it's refinanced, it's paying it back, or you refinance, you pay it back to the LLC, and you can get the normal interest rates. Where if you pay it out of your own HELOC and you're paying it back yourself as a cash out refi, you pay a higher interest rate and other fees. And so that's the way we actually protect our clients from anywhere from 1% to 2%. And when I say clients, this is one client we've done this with, so that he can go ahead and use it, pay back his HELOC, go to the next house, use his HELOC to go ahead and purchase the property through the LLC, do the rehab. And that means that they can also do the rehab as part of the loan. And it all gets, on the refinance, it all comes back as a normal payout for a mortgage, rather than doing it as a self payout.
Yeah. So, and that's great. I love that. And if anybody's heads are spinning about that, or all the different nuances that might go into this effort of trying to make the actual numbers work, and the details of whether you use, a trust or an LLC or, all the other things that come in to be an investor and managing property and all that kind of stuff. What I want you to understand is that you don't have to do this alone. You have partners like your lending partner, and you can even involve, lawyers, CPAs, property managers. Build your team around those that are experts in these different areas of putting this puzzle together. Don't feel that you have to do it yourself. So that what Robert is sharing is a great idea. I have my own insights, but I've been doing this for a long time. Some of you may feel like I've never done anything like this. I've never even bought my own investment property. So please don't get overwhelmed and say, well, I guess I can't talk equity to people because I don't have all these details. Let your lender, so meet with them first. That's your first step, is to meet with a lender and tell them what you're trying to do. Tell them about the 5 things I just showed you and say, if I brought in a homeowner that has a decent amount of equity and at least has some sort of inclination towards one of these efforts, can we sit down? And I'd like to be there too, because you should be there to learn these things. What can I help them understand about these and all those details that do come into play when it comes to that? So please don't feel like you're alone in doing that. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you here is, let's say that before they come in and want to meet, you've got to talk to them in a way that makes you feel like it makes sense to them and, to you to spend your time on it. So let me give you some basic information about what it means to leverage equity. Just some basic things. Okay. These are things that you should know. Okay. So when you leverage a bank loan, so you have a bank loan, right? If you're going to take out a loan on a property, and then you leverage, and this is on a purchase, let's say, and you also leverage equity that they have in a property, which in this case we'll say is a HELOC. Now, if you don't know what a HELOC, if you heard the term, but you don't know what it means, it's a home equity line of credit. Basically what this is it's almost like a credit card.
Calling your leads, but you're not booking any appointments.
So this is really like a credit card, but the basis of the card is on your home. So instead of it being 23% or 25%, we'll say, they're going to give it to you at, let's say right now it's 8%, right? You can even get them, there's introductory rates for 5% for 6 months. There's all sorts of things you can do. This is a variable rate, so it really depends on where the mortgage rates are. It's really just about a point or sometimes 1.5 points higher than a typical mortgage rate. So hopefully that makes sense, right? Again, the reason that the banks are willing, because it's still a bank that's doing this kind of a HELOC, the real reason they're willing to give you that money at that rate is because there's a house involved, right? With the credit card over here, let's say this is a credit card, there's no leverage there of anything. There's no equity or any asset value. It's basically, it's an unsecured loan is what they call it, whereas this is secured with the house. Okay. So that's the advantage. Just so you can let them know, that's the reason they can borrow against their house at a much better rate than they can with their credit card. Most people, and this is what I like to tell people, is most people, they take their budget or their finances and their assets and all that, and they put them in 2 different buckets, right? One of them is their home. And then, when it comes to, I'd say, let's say debt. I'm talking about debt here. One is their home debt and the other is their other debt. Okay. This is usually depreciating debt over here that is revolving in many cases. So just so you understand what these terms mean, revolving debt means that if I have a credit card and I pay it off at the end of every month, I'm going to pay 0% interest. Everyone knows that, right? So if I can use my credit card, if I pay it off in full at every cycle, I'm not going to pay any interest. I only have to pay interest on whatever revolves, whatever goes on to the next cycle, right? So that's when it becomes something as high as 25%. Unfortunately, just so you understand the stats out here, which is kind of crazy, is even though the average homeowner has $300,000 or $300,000 in equity, guess what the average revolving debt that they have? Any idea? The average American right now is $114,000 in debt, in revolving debt. Now you might think, well, that's a lot. You could buy 1 car right now for $114,000. So typically in a house, they've got 1 or 2 cars. They've got some, some student debts. Then they've got a credit card. You start adding that up. The average amount of debt is $114,000. And if this debt, we have some background. Okay, with this debt, if they have an average rate that they're paying of, let's say 12% or 15%, let's say that is a blended rate, we call it that. That's higher than what they can borrow their house against if they're going to use a HELOC at 8%. So just kind of understanding the fundamentals of this, when people look at their home debt, they kind of think, oh, 7% for a home loan is so bad and so horrible. But over here, they're paying 12 to 15 to 20%, and they've got a revolving credit card debt, which is kind of nuts if you think about it that way. So it helps to have that perspective of understanding that this debt and this debt, if you put it all together into a blended rate of 12%, 7% is a lot better, or 8% or whatever they might borrow against. Does that make sense? Just as a foundational understanding. Okay. Now, coming back to what they can do with their home equity, when you have that kind of debt and that kind of rate that you can borrow against it, right? The HELOC, for example, is, let's say that you have, as an example, a $500,000 property that you might want to invest in, and you're going to put 20% down on that property. Okay. Only 20%. That's what's required. For someone that's buying a property that they're going to live in, they could even put a lot less. But let's say on this property, they're going to put 20% down, which is how much? 100,000. Okay. Make sense? So this is $100,000 down. And then you have 400,000. Of course, this is just round numbers. There's closing costs and other fees and stuff, but we'll say $400,000 towards a mortgage. So what makes this powerful is that if they're doing this mortgage at, let's say right now, 7%, and let's say the down payment, which you're using a HELOC for, so let's say you're going to tap into your HELOC right here, you're going to get this maybe at 8%, okay? So there's a blended rate of 7.5% for this property. Now, it's actually different than that because, of course, the majority of it's at 7%. So it's really about 7.25 or something like that. So now you've got a property that you've only taken $100,000 basically out of pocket, and you let the bank pay for the rest of it. So the bank's paying the rest. You're still liable, but the bank is basically like a business partner in this sense if it's an investment. Everyone understand that part of it? Okay. So if we say that this property appreciates at 5% per year, and that's a very conservative appreciation because it's not just appreciation. If we talk about equity, we're talking about principal buy down, tax benefits, other things like that. But let's just say at a very conservative rate, it's 5%. So every single year, this property is going to increase on a compound basis because it'll continue at the rate that it's increased to at 25,000 more or less per year. So even without thinking about the compound growth of that, in 10 years, that's $250,000 of growth. What kind of return is that? It's a 50% return on your money. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, when I say it that way, when I say that kind of return, I only put down $100,000. So if you think about the interest that I'm gaining from this, if I only put down $100,000, I let the mortgage take care of this part of it. And I'll explain how this gets paid, obviously. But even if I consider this came out of my pocket, I'm going to have to pay 8% for this, right? Does that make sense? I'm paying 8% for this. But if I put down $100,000 and it increases at $25,000 per year in terms of equity gain, what's my return? What's my rate of return?
25% a year less your 8%.
Thank you. So it's 25% per year. If I take away the 8%, what does that come down to? The 17? Did I get that right? 10%. Okay. So there I'm getting a gain of 17%. Is that a good gain? Okay. So that's, I'm explaining this to you in a way that I hope, and I'm doing it slow enough so some of you might be bored to death because this is simple stuff. But others might think, oh, okay, I didn't quite see it that way. I'm actually making a 17% gain on my money because I only put $100,000 down on this property. Now, I still have to pay that 8% loan to do that, but that means the difference between the two is 17%. Now, I have a partner right here. He wants 7% as well, okay? But on this $400,000. But what makes this great, if it's a leverage of either your living expenses, because you have to live somewhere, or it's an investment property, and let's say it's an investment property, who's going to pay this mortgage? Let's say this mortgage right now is $2,400 a month. And you have other expenses, right? Let's say you've got your, it's all your PITI, right? So you have all those expenses. So let's say altogether, you're at $2,650 per month. But I've got a renter in there that's willing to pay $2,800 per month. I'm using this number because I have one that's just like this right now. I mean, this is almost identical to a property I bought just last month. It took me 2 days to rent it out. I rented it out at $2,500 or $2,800 per month. And my cost per month is around $2,650. Now, you might think that's very little cash flow. I'm only making $150 per month, but I didn't buy the property necessarily for this, at least right off the bat. I'll make more money as time goes on because I can raise the rent. But the main benefit that I'm getting from this is I'm getting a 5% gain, not on my $100,000, but on my $500,000. I let the bank help me pay for that. And I'm only having to pay them 7%, for that. And not only is it only 7%, but I've got a renter basically covering both the principal and the interest and the taxes of this property. Does that make sense to everybody, what I just said? Okay. Any question to clarify this? Because sometimes I'll talk to my homeowners and do a little bit of this kind of stuff just to give them some confidence, like, oh, I really should be looking at this more closely with what my equity is and what my opportunities are. And then you can start going and looking at homes. This might be the reason they go in and meet with your lender to get more into the details, because they can actually crunch those numbers or run those numbers. So comments or questions about what I just did right here? Nothing?
I got to make some changes on one of my investment properties based on what you just said.
Okay.
And I've been running numbers I've got a home for sale, and I've been trying to help these guys understand what they can rent it for if they took it and created it into a duplex. Because it's in a situation where you actually could do that very simply. You have a studio in the basement that you can rent for what I'm looking at Rentometer, and I'm seeing you can rent it for between $900 and $1,200, the studio.
Yeah.
And then upstairs you can rent for around $2,000 to $2,100, $2,200. So you're putting around over $3,000, and your mortgage on that, like you said, is going to be around $2,650, because it's about a $430,000 home. So I've been trying to help people understand that some of them don't get it and don't want to be renters. But for me, I'm looking at it and going, I've got a property I need to get rid of and buy that one, so I can start leveraging it myself. So anyway,
maybe not this week, but maybe next week or one of the weeks coming up, I'll do this with the renter side of things. Because I don't know if you know this, on your website, you now have a rent versus buy calculator. And I'll explain the best way to kind of talk to renters about that pathway to qualification. But yeah, I love that. And when you start looking at sweat equity or forced equity, or that you're putting into a property combined with just letting the market do its thing, there's so much opportunity for growth in real estate investing. I want everyone that I work with, whether they just live in their own home and or they invest in other properties, it's always an investment. Even your own property can be an investment. Even if you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he said it's not an investment or whatever, Dave Ramsey, it still is an investment. Of course, you can overdo it. Don't put a pool in if you really wanted to have a return on investment, but there's still opportunity for every property that you own to continue to increase in value. Now, one other thing I want to tell you, because a lot of people get caught up on, well, wait a second, even though I've got this 8% loan out here on my $100,000, I've got a second mortgage now I've got to pay. And my renters aren't covering this part, right? Some people think about that, right? Obviously, I would love to tap into my equity. I would love to buy a property and have them pay the mortgage on that property. But now I've got a $100,000 loan at 8% that over the long term, yes, it's a good deal. But now it's telling me at 8% interest, even if I pay interest only on that, I've got to pay somewhere around, let's say it's $1,500 a month. I don't know. Eric, you can give me the exact number. If I've got an 8% HELOC,
$166.66.
how much is it?
$667.
667.
Bank interest only, which you would for the first 10 years before it went fully amortized.
Yeah, $670.
At 8%. At 8%.
At 8%. So it's really not that much at $670. But a lot of people are thinking, I don't have an extra $670 every single month to pay towards this, right? And that actually, it's really not that much money if you think about it. And that's only interest only. That means they're not paying down the $100,000. They might think, well, I want to pay it down a little bit more. So just so you have an understanding of what I like to do with the HELOC is, this is my favorite thing to talk to people about because it gets everybody excited, and you can talk to them about it as well, is the way our banks have taught us how to manage our money at home is different than anybody else would ever do it normally. When I say anyone else, I'm talking about businesses. Businesses would never take, let's say you have an income. So I'm going to come in here. Let's say we have an income of $5,000 a month. Okay. What does everybody in the United States pretty much do with their income of $500,000 a month? What do you do? Well, they do spend it eventually, but the first thing they do is they have it deposited where? In their checking account. So this $5,000 then goes to a checking account. How much does your checking account earn in interest? Zero. It doesn't earn anything. They tell you about all the perks you get. Sometimes they even charge you for that checking account. So you're getting 0% interest on your $5,000 a month. Okay. Would Walmart ever put money? Because I don't know if you know this, Walmart doesn't make money off of the margins from what they sell. That's not where their money is. I don't know if you know this. So they were so good at RFID and so good at net 30s on what they're, anybody that wants to sell it, sell their product there. Anyway, we could get in that in a whole discussion. It's so fun to talk about it. They would never do this. They make money off their money. I hope you understand that. Almost every business makes money off their money, more so if they're a big enough business than even the products and services many times that they sell. Okay. That's the key for letting money work for itself. And you've heard that term before. So when you put money into your checking account, it's earning 0% interest, right? Now, what you do is during the course of the month, while this money is kind of put in here, you have most likely a credit card, right? You're putting everything on a credit card. Most people aren't even doing debit anymore. Maybe they are doing debit. They probably do debit when it comes to their utilities and their mortgage payments. They're paying it directly out of their account. But most people are putting stuff on their credit card. So you basically have credit card payments and you have debit payments. And when I say debit payments, basically just directly coming out of checking. That makes sense? Okay. Now, then what happens at the end of the month, once the 30 days, so this is a 30-day cycle. At the end of the month, let's say, hopefully you've got a budget and you only spent $4,200 of your money, because that's what you want to do, is you don't want to spend more than you have. Those that spend more than they have, put it on credit cards, and those credit card payments, they're going to pay up to 23%, right? We already determined, or 25% or whatever that is. So even someone that's very good at their money, they've got an excess, in this case, of $800 a month. Where does that excess of $800 go?
Stays in the checking account.
Sometimes it does, but a lot of people do what with that money? They put it into their savings account because they're going to make more money from their savings, right? So then they take $800, or maybe let's say they only take $500. We'll do that. That's not good.
You're just FYI, you're at time.
Oh, shoot. Is it all right if I keep talking about this, or should I?
Cool with me.
Okay.
If somebody needs to jump off, go ahead and we'll have it recorded.
We'll have it recorded and you can finish up. So let's say $500 goes into savings. And we've been told, this is like what everybody tells us. Even church tells us this, like church leaders and stuff like this. You need to have 6 months of reserve sitting in the bank. You need to have all this money sitting here. So we put all this money in savings. How much does our savings account earn? Anyone know? 1.5%.
1.5%, 1 to 2%, something like that.
Yeah, 1 to 2%. What kind of return is that? Is that a good return? Right now.
In the pants.
Inflation. That's not even inflation right now. What's inflation at? 2.3, 2.5. They're trying to get it under 3%. So basically, we're losing money by putting it in our savings. Absolutely just losing money. Well, here's the secret, and I'll try to make this really quick for this. Is this interesting to everybody to kind of see this? 'Cause to me, this is fascinating because it ties into leveraging equity. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to take all this out. Don't do this anymore. Now, you need to have a reserve. Should you always have a reserve? Yes, right? But does it have to be cash? Did you know that almost every company out there, and I've been on the executive team of big companies, we don't keep a bunch of money sitting in the bank. We don't do that. We use lines of credit. So home equity line of credit is basically that. We have the ability to tap into that credit if we need it. So here's what I recommend that you do with the HELOC. Make your HELOC, your checking and savings account. So this is basically going to take over checking and savings. You no longer need checking and savings, or you'll have one tied to a HELOC. Don't keep any money in there. Again, you can disagree with me on this. I'm just going to show you what I like to do with my money and how I manage it so that I'm maximizing my returns. So with this HELOC right here, I have, let's say right now I have a $420,000 HELOC credit. I don't pay any interest. So if my HELOC's at 7%, I don't pay any amount on that, just like a credit card if there's no balance, just like a credit card. Okay, so I only pay it when there's a balance. Does that make sense? Okay, now in my HELOC, every single time I make money, anytime money comes in, it goes into the HELOC. So this is income. Every time I get a paycheck, every time I sell a house, every time my renter pays me to live in one of my properties, this money goes into my HELOC. Got it? Any payments that I have to make, whatever those payments are, even though I'll divide it up with credit cards. That's how I separate things out with credit cards. Don't have to do with an account. I have a credit card for my business. I have a credit card for my home expenses. I have a credit card for my rental properties, things like that. Okay. Those are where I track all the payments that go to those different places. Okay. Now, you obviously can set up LLCs. I don't want to get into all that, business accounts and things like that. You can still do that even with the HELOC. So all of my expenses come out. In business, we call this basically, right? Do you know? It's a balance sheet, basically what we're doing. We have what's called a balance sheet, a profit and loss report. You know, that's what businesses do. Think of your home now in the same way. A balance sheet is basically, I've got money coming in and I've got expenses going out, and I want to be at zero, right? I want to be at zero with the balance sheet so that I'm maximizing any excess into the biggest return as I possibly can. Now, obviously, there are expenses that are depreciating, or I'm going to go out to dinner. I'm going to do this or that. It might not be something that I can expense. So just so you know, that's there, but you have a budget. So I have income and I still keep my budget. So these are the three things you need. I have my budget, which makes sure that I don't spend more than I earn. Hopefully you all believe in that. Don't spend more than you earn, okay? If I have an emergency, I've got $420,000 to tap into. Do I need more than that to tap into if I need to? It's funny. I've talked to people that literally have over $100,000 to $200,000 just sitting in their bank account in savings, making 1% to 2% a year, meaning they're losing money every year on it because inflation is making that money worth less than they're making on it. And they let it sit there in case there's an emergency. And I talked to a family just recently. They've literally had that much money in their account for 10 years and have never had to use it for anything. But they like the safety and security of having it there. So just so you understand, that's the mentality that they're trying to kind of put us into, is that we need that money there. So if you have a balance sheet, a P&L, and a budget for your home, this is how it works. All of your income goes into the HELOC, all the expenses go out. The only time that you take money out of your HELOC that isn't just managing basically the balance between income and expenses in that is when you invest. If it's only on an investment, so let's say that I spend $100,000 on buying a property as a down payment. Okay, so there's my down payment. and I put $100,000. So now I've got a balance on my HELOC of $100,000, but I know that I'm going to be paying 8% for that, or 7%, whatever. We'll say it's 8% to keep it as I was talking about before. I know I'm going to pay 8% for that balance because it's a revolving debt now. 8% I'm going to pay for that. But I also know that because it's a $500,000 home, that I'm attributing the gain to a 25% gain, like we talked about before. So I've got 17% gain. So now I can feel good about it. I don't have to feel bad that I have $100,000 sitting in my HELOC debt because I know that it's making me more money than I'm spending on that debt. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, because your income continues to pay this down, like I have money coming into my HELOC 4 to 8 times a month. Okay. And when I get money that comes into that HELOC, I no longer have a mortgage payment or a amount due at any certain given time. As a matter of fact, when it looks at the money that I have in there, I'm like 7-8 months ahead of schedule to pay off any of what's required in terms of that interest-only payment. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? So basically, you don't have to think about it in terms of your budget. So here's the budget issue. I don't have a $679 or $800 or $1,000 monthly payment that I got to figure out how to pay for. By actually making sure that all my income comes out, even if my expenses are 90%, let's say, or let's say in that other case, it was like an extra $800 a month, right? That we had extra, maybe $500, whatever that is, that instead of putting it into a savings account, it's eating away at my HELOC. So here's my HELOC right here, balance. Let's say this is the balance. And I've got $100,000 in that balance. But every single month that I have my income coming in and my expenses going out, I keep eating away at a little bit of that money just by basically doing what I've been always doing with my managing my money, but it's not going into a savings account. It's paying down. But what is it paying down?
8% interest.
My investment. So if it's paying down my investment, what does that mean in terms of my investment? I'm gaining more. Does that make sense? There's actually a gain within this effort of doing it. That's why people can pay off their home in debt sooner by leveraging their HELOC and then even investing if they want to invest in it. The only time this is on the plus side of your HELOC, this is where, well, there's no really minus side, but this is where you have excess month after month revolving debt. But this revolving debt is only investments. If you make sure that it's only investments, don't put money in here or a debt in your HELOC to go on vacation. Make sure your budget manages your vacation. If I'm going to save up for my vacation, you can still do it through your budget and understand, even with your investments, your profit and loss, and through your balance sheet, how much you have to spend. Like this year, I might have paid down my HELOC. Let's say I paid down my HELOC $10,000. But I did that only with the excess of money coming in. I want to go on vacation for $5,000, so I'm going to take out another $5,000 of that to go on vacation, but I don't have to feel guilty about that. All I have to understand is that money would have gone into my savings to pay for that and not earn me anything. Every single time you pay down your HELOC a little bit more, you're paying less interest on that overall amount. Does that make sense? So by continuing to put money into your HELOC, you're basically limiting the overall interest cost that you're going to have to pay per month. Like if you just left it at $100,000, that's $670 a month is what Eric said, right? In terms of interest that you're paying. But if I keep letting the excess money that I have until I need it for something else, like going on vacation could be a part of that. Buying new tires for the car, it could be a part of that. But if I let it keep eating away until I need that money, not just let it sit there doing nothing and earning nothing, one month I might only have an interest, $550 or $600 or whatever, and it'll keep eating away at it. You'll find that maybe in 5 years, 10 years, oh, I have no debt here anymore. So guess what that's telling you? I should be buying other properties or investing other money. Does this make sense what I just did right here? To some degree, hopefully. I guess what I want to impress on you as I finish this up is that equity is the most powerful way to build and grow wealth. Most people are not leveraging their equity to pay off debt that's at a higher rate, to do one of those 5 things that I talked to you about before, and even understand the fact that they can manage their money for wealth growth in a way like this, or so many ways, like even what Robert mentioned before. So I guess what I'm trying to say is start getting smart about equity and leveraging equity. If you're not there yet, don't worry about it. I'm not even there yet in the many different ways that this can be managed. So what I would recommend is you do those things that I mentioned before. Send out a home report every single month to all your homeowners. Gather as many homeowners into your database as possible and just send it out. Every single power hour, look at those that are opening it up and make that phone call. Hey, John, this is Mike. I noticed you're opening up that equity report that I've been sending you. You've got $300,000 in equity. Have you thought about doing something with that to grow and build wealth? Well, I don't know. I don't want to sell my house. What are you talking about? Well, there's 5 things you can do. Would you like to sit down and kind of strategize about what you could do? We've got lots of ideas. You could pay off your debt sooner. You could do that, move up, the downsize, the invest, whatever that is. And then if you're not ready to have that detailed conversation, I promise you your lender is, right? Your lender knows these things well enough that you can bring them in and start strategizing about it. And then you've got a new client because they're buying and selling property. I now have clients that never even thought of themselves as an investor buying their 2nd or 3rd investment property. My mom being one of them. I mean, literally, my mom, who never would have been an investor, she's the most conservative person in the whole world, loves investing in property. So it works. It works for your mom. It works for anybody, right? So take the time to start learning about equity. Leverage it for yourself. Help your family and friends do it. Expand it out to all the people that you know. You can build a whole business just around helping people leverage equity. The next time we get together, we'll talk about helping people get equity in the first place and want to do this through a first-time purchase. But for now, there's so much that you can do to help your clients, your homeowner clients, understand that there's more to do than just letting money sit there in their home, in their bank, basically doing nothing for them, earning 0 to maybe 1 or 2%, when they could literally be building and growing wealth with your help. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being a part of this. If you have any other questions or concerns or thoughts, send me a request, send our team a request, support@captivateagent.com. And I'll tell you, if you're still hung up on some of this, go sit down with your lender and say, hey, I just had a coach talk to me about leveraging equity, these 5 things. What does that really mean? Do you talk to clients about this very often? Your eyes will be open to a whole world of opportunity that you might not have known about. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next week or see you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.